You ever heard of Millie, the hanged lady? That's what Josh, my best friend, asked me one night while we were camping in the woods. Seriously, is this another story you made up, Josh? Asked Sue skeptically. No, this is 100% true, seriously. You guys never heard of this? I shrugged my shoulders in denial. Josh loved telling stories, especially the urban legends he'd read on the internet. Most likely he'd prepared a dozen of them in advance for tonight. The story begins one night in the forest. Forest where we just happened to be, Josh began seriously. I smiled out of the corner of my mouth and exchanged a glance with Sue, who knew as well as I did, now that he was off and running, there was no stopping him. You see, Millie was a high schooler like the three of us, and ever since she was a little girl, she'd been picked on by the other kids. Millie was different from the others. She always kept to herself, didn't dare speak up, didn't mix well with the others, and soon she became the target of others' abuse. Over the years, her reputation followed her, and the harassment from the other kids in her class became increasingly cruel. Sue kept her neutral expression, but I could feel that the story touched her. She, too, had struggled to fit in after her parents had moved her here, and it was only after befriending Josh and me that she'd managed to come out of her shell. But if she hadn't, she might have been subjected to the kind of behavior on display here, too. In fact, she had confessed to me that this had even been the case at her previous school. One wintry evening, several students decided to play a prank on Millie, Josh continued, the flames from the campfire reflecting his eyes. They all grabbed scary masks and armed themselves with knives and chased Millie as she made her way home through the forest. Millie was terrified, and she fled as far as she could. She got lost in the forest. The story goes that during the night, cold, lost, and hungry, she found a rope stretched over a branch, like an invitation, and that was where she ended her life. What a horror, Sue said, still captivated by the tale. Since then, they say she haunts these woods, and that it's possible to summon her by repeating certain words. Cut the crap, I said uncomfortably. I swear it's true. All you have to do is stand in front of a branch and say, Millie, Millie, why are you so alone? 3 times. Then turn around and say, Millie, Millie, come talk to me. Just once. Then you'll hear the sound of a rope swinging under the weight of her body. And the story goes, if you're unfortunate enough to turn around and look at her, she'll kill you. Okay, that's definitely nonsense. No, really, Josh, you had me going at first, but I don't believe it anymore, Sue said, standing up. You'll excuse me, boys, but I'm going to hit the sack. Good night, and don't stay up too late tomorrow. We're leaving early. With that, she headed off to her tent. Josh and I stayed up a while, staring at the fire in silence, but as if he couldn't hold back any longer, he finally asked, Do you want to do it? Do what? I asked him. Well, repeat the sentence and everything. Come on, we've been walking around picking mushrooms all day. What the hell? I had a feeling that if I didn't agree, he'd ask me every night until I gave in. So, I preferred to take the lead. We found ourselves in front of a branch a few dozen feet from the camp, where the fire was beginning to fade. We had equipped ourselves with our flashlights to see where we were going. Josh seemed pretty excited. Have to admit that once we got to the branch, I was more apprehensive than I would have imagined about some stupid urban legend. You're the one doing it, Josh told me. Why me? It was your idea. It was your story. But I've already done it 15 times. Come on, it's your turn, man. Don't back down now. I huffed. This was pretty typical of Josh. I stood in front of the branch, flashlight in hand. Josh gave me the sentence to repeat 3 times, and with a stutter or two, I managed to get it right. I turned around, my back to the branch. Josh stood next to me because he said if he looked, it wouldn't work. "Millie, come talk to me," I finally said in a whisper. "Hey, don't shit yourself," Josh laughed. We waited for a few moments. "Well, I don't hear any taunt rope noises. I guess that means I get to live." "Maybe she was busy elsewhere tonight," Josh replied with a laugh. "Come on, let's go to bed. It's starting to freeze out here." We headed back to the camp. I couldn't help but look back for a moment while holding my lamp in front of me. For a moment, I could have sworn I saw something moving from right to left near the tree where we'd been for a few moments. Damn, I really gotta stop listening to Josh's stories. I was awakened sometime later by a scream. I scrambled to my feet, ears pricked and wondering if I'd imagined it. I could see through the canvas of my tent that it was still dark outside. "Josh, Sue?" I called aloud, our tents being right next to each other. No answer. Why the hell aren't they answering? If they're playing a prank on me, I'm gonna kill them. I grabbed the flashlight from my tent, my cell phone, and quietly stepped out. "Josh, Sue?" I asked again. I lit up their tent in turns and noticed they were both open and empty. I couldn't remember clearly what I'd heard, but I thought the scream was from a girl. I couldn't believe for a second that Sue would participate in a prank like this, but if it wasn't that, then maybe something serious had happened. As I stood there trying to think about where they might have gone and what they might be doing, a strong wind blew. To my right, a few dozen feet away, I spotted something moving. "Josh, I swear to God, if this is one of your stupid jokes," I said, as I slowly approached, my flashlight trying to shine through the vegetation around me. I walked towards where I thought I'd seen the movement, and finally I saw something just to my right moving again. Slowly, heavily, I heard the sound of a taut rope. I shone my flashlight from bottom to top, and there I saw Josh, hanging by his neck with a rope tied to a branch over a tree. I was silent for a few seconds at the shock. "Josh, please, stop this." His face was contorted in an expression of sheer terror. Eyes revolted back. His skin was blue, lifeless. I nudged him with my hand, and he just rocked back and forth a little. I couldn't believe it. It must have been an elaborate prank on his part. It wasn't possible. Not Josh. He was glowing with life. He would never take his own life like that, in the middle of the night, on a camping trip. The reality finally dawned on me, and I was overcome by a violent sob. My legs buckled, and I threw up on the ground. As I wiped my mouth, my eyes misty with tears, I heard something impossible. The sound of a taut rope slowly swinging right behind me. I straightened up, the sensation of mortal danger just behind my neck. "Who's there?" I asked, my voice trembling and still tight. The rope suddenly stopped moving. "Why don't you look at me?" said a feminine voice from beyond the grave, whose windpipe seemed to be strangled. What? Your friend looked at me. Look at him now. He's so much happier here with me." I remained silent, my eyes fixed in front of me, as if frozen in place. "It's impossible. She can't be real. You're having a nightmare. Wake up, wake up, wake up. Look at me." I ran. I didn't know where, and I didn't care. She'd killed Josh, and now this thing, whatever it was after me. After a minute, I remembered Sue's scream. She must have been awakened like me, maybe by Josh getting up, or when he'd been killed. She must have discovered the corpse, too. With any luck, she'd managed to escape. I figured if she'd gone off with her cell phone, she'd have tried to escape to the nearest road, which was about 15 miles, even though there was no way she could get there before the night was over. I tried calling the police and my parents without success, but luckily the GPS still seemed to work, so I followed the direction. I was walking fast, so as not to collapse on the ground from exhaustion. I was already out of breath, and I couldn't stop. I always made sure to aim my flashlight at the ground in front of me to be on the safe side. The urban legend Josh had told me had said that you had to turn around and look at her for her to kill you. So, maybe I shouldn't look her in the eye. I felt like I was being stalked. I flinched at every movement of a branch in the wind, and I constantly felt eyes on the back of my neck. But I was too scared to turn around. I had to get the hell out of the forest. Sorry, Josh. I promise I'll come back for you as soon as I find some help. I spotted an abandoned cabin we'd seen on the way here. I remembered that Sue had said that this was where we would find shelter if there was a storm or something. Suddenly I saw a light pierce the darkness through the wooden planks of the cabin. I sprinted towards it. Sue! Sue, I'm coming! I shouted out of breath. I stepped inside, the boards creaking beneath my feet. The light streamed in from under the door, and the cabin only had the one bedroom. I crossed the space between me and the door, glad I'd found Sue before I fled this place. I put my hand on the door handle. Sue? I paused. Silence was unnatural. Something was wrong. Sue, are you okay? I asked through the door, my hand still on the handle. Answer me, please. You're freaking me out. Josh is dead, and the thing that killed him is still around. We need to get the hell out of here. No response. Sue! I noticed the light moving under the door, as if someone was holding the strap at the end of their finger and swinging right to left. No, 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 I said in horror. In response, a childish laugh rang out from behind the door. I ran to the front door, which opened with a shove on my shoulder, and ran straight out of there. After a minute, I collapsed on the ground. It forced me to stop and think about what had happened. Maybe it wasn't Sue. Maybe this thing had managed to grab a flashlight and was just playing games with me. After all, I had no idea the extent of its abilities. I kept my eyes on my knees as I pondered what I'd seen. Then I heard it. The sound which I could now detect amongst any other sound. The sound of a rope stretching taut, swinging from left to right. Sound wasn't coming from behind me this time. It was from my left. I could feel her sinister gaze, inviting me to look at her and sealing my death in the process. I stood up, eyes on my feet, and started to run to my right, but I was stopped in my tracks. The sound of the rope was now coming from just ahead. Without thinking, I turned in the opposite direction. Again, sound was coming from right in front of me. She's everywhere. I'm screwed. I stood there with my eyes on my feet, trying to think of a solution. Josh was dead. Sue was missing, maybe dead too, and this running around all night. I closed my eyes, and tears quickly formed at the ends. I had an idea. Legend said that it was looking at her that allowed her to kill you. What if I just kept moving forward, looking at my feet, or even closed my eyes? The idea of walking through the forest with my eyes closed sent a chill down my spine. But what other choice did I have? I've been squatting here for several minutes now, writing this message. I've tried to call the police, but every time I call, all I get is static. I don't know where Sue is or how to get rid of this thing. I'm alone, I'm cold, and I'm exhausted. If you're reading this, please help me. Please help me. You're still here. Thanks so much for joining us for tonight's spooky tale. If you'd like a little bit more spooky in your life, why not click on one of the videos that appears at the end of our story? Or maybe head on over to one of our playlists where you can get your fill of spooky content. If you like your spooky a little more tactile, I've got a new book that's come out. If you'd like your own copy, there's a link below in the description where you can get your own copy of my spooky book. If you like what you see here on the channel and think you might like to support in a more monetized way, then why not come over to Patreon or become a member on YouTube? Speaking of, let's go ahead and thank our members now. Thanks to Civ Garstad and Unicorn Hollow for being our spooky ghost contributors. Thanks to Janet, Lee Kendall, Saikat, Ronda J, and Sue Casper for being our spooky skeleton contributors. And thanks to Hi Stacy, Winter, Xaronan, Emily Coltsfoot, Stephanie Carrington, Tyler Parker, Cinnamon Fox, Sarah ASMR42, and Bella Lee for being our Ghostly Reader tier contributors. Thanks everyone so much. We just couldn't do the show without you. If you too would like to support the show, come on down to Patreon or become a member on YouTube. For just $5 a month, you get your stories 12 hours early at 8:30 a.m. as opposed to 8:30 p.m. Also, if you'd like to join our Ghostly Reader contributor tier over on Patreon, you get a book anytime I write one on your doorstep, as long as you live in the continental U.S., of course. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.